to today's webinar on reviewing CTE curriculum for SED approval. My name is Dave Arnson. I'm a consultant now, but spent 28 years in career and technical education as an instructor, building administrator, and director of CTE. Served on the ACTIA board for 11 years and now serve on the NISACTI board. So a little bit of background on me before we get going. The purpose of today's webinar is really to review, if you will, what it is to go through the curriculum review process, either for an approval or a reapproval. And this is the definition right from the SED implementation guide. And the curriculum review is really part of the self-study process. The self-study process engages a group of individuals within the school or BOCES to review the program for its appropriateness for program approval or reapproval. The bottom of this slide says something very important, that is that the SED does not approve or endorse curriculum or curriculum products. The program approval is really a decision that the local district or BOCES makes, and that through the process of the self-study and external review, the BOCES or the school district just sends assurances to state ed that a curriculum has been developed or adopted and has been reviewed. So if you take a look at the actual verbiage from SED, you'll find that it indicates the components that they believe are critical to the process of reviewing a curriculum. It has to be aligned with, first of all, state and national standards. It's non-duplicative, so therefore it leads students on a sequence of learning. Many BOCES are a 2-year sequence, and some of the LEAs are now developing 4-year sequences and 3-year sequences. The secondary curriculum is certainly aligned with post-secondary career options leading to degrees or credentials, and that more importantly, state certified faculty with appropriate academic and or CT certification are engaged in the process. So the guidance that SED gives to districts and BOCES is that the first part is to identify those individuals that will compromise the self-study team. Certainly the self-study team is a fundamental core group of the teachers, especially the CTE and academic teachers that are involved in the BOCES as integration teachers, but should also include somebody from a students with disabilities arena, as well as, if possible, guidance personnel and administrators to be to set up the conditions by which the rest of the curriculum can be reviewed by business and industry or post-secondary representatives. So process guidance is really about, from state ed, that the district determines the procedures used and how to complete this process. They do not dictate the procedures, only what they look for in terms of outcomes. It's important that the people that are involved realize that they are not getting SED guidelines to adhere to, other than that they have reviewed the curriculum and believe they meet the relevant standards, both for business and industry and for the academic standards. One of the things that's important for BOCES to remember when they seek approval is they have to have academic teachers from at least 2 of their component districts, 2 different teachers from 2 different districts, to review the academic content in terms of integration or specialized credit approval. They confirm that the content that they've looked at meets integrated or specialized units of credit, and that the units of credit meet the distributive requirements set forth by SED, for example, the seat time, etc., and syllabi. Documentation of the curriculum ultimately is up to the BOCES or the school district. SED recommends that you save any documentation and moving forward, and that if there are any changes that you can notify them prior to the 5-year reapproval process. Conducting the curriculum review is really a process of assuring that the program is aligned with the national and industry standards, our New York State CTE standards, the learning standards, and now we're moving from Common Core to New York State standards again, so that'll be interesting in the next couple of years how that progresses, and includes any integrated or standalone career and financial management curriculum. It's important that each of the programs, the self-study ensures that they perform at the level of rigor to meet the industry standards as well as potential post-secondary connections. With that being stated, it's also important to recognize that Individuals with Disabilities Act mandates that we have to include students with disabilities in the curriculum and the assessment process. It's really important that we recognize how challenging that is when reading levels are low and content material is offered at a much higher reading level. And we need to consider all those factors when it goes into working with students with disabilities. And so advocates for those students and students themselves can be a great addition to the self-study process, bringing actually their perspective on how the programs should progress and how they should be developed to meet their needs. Again, a note that the CTE program approval doesn't constitute SED's endorsement of the curriculum or the instructional materials, only that the school district or BOCES has gone through the process and provides assurances to that fact. So the key elements in terms of a curriculum are that curriculum have to have many different versions and appearances and looks and templates, but a course description is really important. So an overview of the course, what students will engage in over the course of the program of study. It should include things like program, crosswalks, maps, outlines, scope and sequence documents, whatever you feel in your school or BOCES is important to document the integrated and specialized credit and the alignment to academic and CTE standards. The coursework also needs to satisfy a requirement for either integrated or standalone career and financial management, and that they demonstrate that it has rigor for college and career readiness, as I mentioned before. Foundational coursework leading to more advanced coursework is that notion of having a sequential process, as well as lessons in one course aren't duplicated in other courses. And this would be more consistent with a 4-year CTE program in a local school district. And also that a minimum of 3.5 credits are available for students, and that 4 credits are awarded for programs offering integrated academic credit. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this slide, there are a lot of different looks for a CTE curriculum. And what I'm going to do now is kind of review with you a couple, several that we are going to look at. And this is one where the curriculum defines the industry-based objectives, the sample learning experiences. So if someone was to walk in the room, the types of activities they'd see students engaging in. Below that, at the bottom in the center of the page, is the crosswalk standards that are identified through working in this unit. And then on the right side, assessment ideas. So that's one template. Another template from another BOCES includes key questions, again, the learning targets, assessment ideas. The related standards are listed a little bit differently. But again, you can see that the intention is to demonstrate this is what students will be required to develop understandings of and how they will show those understandings. Yet another template lists the activities by lesson number. This one again has titles and a lesson outcomes and assessment strategies. But what I like about this one is it also has a great coding system at the bottom of the page so that the reader understands what the codings for the integrated academics CDOS and CFM standards really mean. Another option that some are already using and some should have an opportunity to look at is an online curriculum management system that is facilitated through ACTEA, the Association for Career and Technical Education Administrators, which is known as RUBICON Atlas. Using Atlas, all of those components are included, if you will. But the really neat part about Atlas is that it maps to the standards very directly. And if you take a look in the second column, it says article review and class activity. By clicking on those links, you'll be taken right to the actual activity, and teachers can share those with students on whiteboards or through LCD projectors, or they can also print them out. So the electronic process is really interesting. One of the things that I feel strongly about is that curriculum is not a static product, but it is something that is a living, breathing item. And this really does facilitate the ability of instructors to use their curriculum and to share it with students on a daily basis. One of the things that I think is really important in the curriculum process is to help the readers and the people that are reviewing the curriculum to understand the pacing and therefore the mapping of the curriculum over the course of a year or two. So curriculum mapping really does something that is important, and that is it creates that roadmap for the learners and the teachers to use. It's kind of like you could drive from here to California just by following road signs, but if you had AAA and you asked for a triptych, you'd find all those unique and interesting sites along the way and make your trip much more enjoyable, and you would have a better schedule of how far to drive and when to stop and what hotels to stay at and what sites to see. So the same thing goes for curriculum. This mapping creates an opportunity for the learners to know where they're heading and where they've been, and also gives the teacher a great way to sequence the coursework. It creates this flow because it makes a logical sequence of the activities, and it also builds obviously on prior knowledge and skills. It provides structure to the learning experience, and it eliminates what I call random acts of learning. And again, it can take on all different forms, but it should demonstrate the scope and sequence of the learning. Your local BOCES or school decides on a prescribed format, and it's highly recommended that a standardized curriculum template is used within a school or a district. Here are a couple examples of a mapping document. This one is pretty broad-based. It talks about things in terms of time by month. It also shares the types of main learning units that'll be covered or activities, and has a small notation for the integrated standards that are included in that unit. So this is a month by month, pretty easy to read, and it can provide people that are reviewing your curriculum with a very quick and easy map to say, okay, I see how this program progresses over the course of the year. This is yet another one, and this one is broken down even further into weeks. So that week 1, week 2, and etc., the students and teachers and reviewers have a sense of what is going to be taking place during that week in terms of content. This is another approach for a curriculum map, which is included directly in the template for the curriculum. But these are the numbers on the left column represent days of the year. So these are daily lesson plans. And what this does is creates a very specific map for what's going to be covered on what particular day of the school year. This is going back to the RUBICON Atlas electronic process. What's very interesting about this is that you can see the sequence in a snapshot, if you will, for the majority of the year, depending on how many units you have. But if you were to be using the Atlas system, again, clicking on one of the units that are in blue on the left-hand column will bring you right to the curriculum template that we looked at before, which again can be linked to actual lessons and worksheets, etc., and quizzes. So there are some advantages to an electronic system, but I thought I'd show you all these types of mappings to give you an indication that there is no one real best way to do it. There are multiple ways for you to consider in developing your curriculum maps. So now we get to the part of the process where we really start getting down at the table and start talking with the individuals that are involved in what is involved in the curriculum review process. First of all, remember that we have to identify the individuals. They should be representatives of these areas. We have to identify the national or industry standards that the program is developed around. The curriculum document that I spoke of before has to be adopted, developed, and used for your particular BOCES or school district. The first step is that the integrated academic teachers interview with the CTE teachers to really start talking about the academic standards that are embedded in the program, probably developing enhancing activities and adding some activities to deepen the rigor of the program in terms of academic standards. But these crosswalks are an important first step. The second step would be to work with people in the organization who understand the CDOS and CFM and career readiness standards to do the same thing. And the units start to really build on themselves. And the CTE teacher, of course, is the foundation of these discussions because he knows what he's going to take the students through in terms of learning experiences. And the individuals, whether they're academic or CDOS or CFM or career readiness folks, really help him define or her define what the embedded skills would be in any of those activities that link back to these standards. The self-study team would then kind of put all this work together and have a framework that they could begin to share with members of business and industry and post-secondary education to make sure that everybody is on board with what is in place so far. Now, if you've already had an approval, a reapproval is a little bit simpler because people have already looked at it before. But any changes that have been made in the program need to be pointed out. And certainly if it's for initial approval, the curriculum review really needs the input of business and industry from the perspective of whether or not the industry standards are being met. And from post-secondary as to are there any connections and what are they to post-secondary coursework in that content area. So any of the recommendations that are made during these initial self-study meetings should be documented and then really considered for inclusion to revise the curriculum, whether it's an addition, a deletion, or an expansion. And that's a really important part of the process, because from that process, once the curriculum review is done, it is ready to be included in the self-study report that will go to the external review team. And once there, it is again looked at by other stakeholders, and any recommendations that are made at that point are addressed, and then it is submitted to the board and the superintendent for signature and forwarding to SED for approval. So with all that being said, there are many steps, but it's really a pretty holistic experience. Once the review process stakeholders are identified, you begin to take a look at the CTE curriculum from the perspective of the industry, academic, CDOS, and career readiness standards. That process, if you will, really defines where there are opportunities to enhance the program, where there are gaps, and where other pieces of the curriculum need to be bolstered, and where other parts of the curriculum are already in place and more than adequate. Those curriculum documents that we talked about obviously should include those course descriptions, crosswalks, outlines, sequencing maps, and unit plans. Those are really key components to any curriculum documentation that is being developed for program approval or reapproval. Those curriculum documents should also describe the learning objectives, the activities and assessment strategies, and certainly any differentiation strategies for students with disabilities that have been developed and included. The curriculum development process should also be really supported by external sources that have been through this experience. The fact that many of you are joined us today is evidence that you are using those external resources to develop a deeper understanding of the SED program approval process or reapproval process. Folks like SED can be very helpful, the TAC, SREB, the Southern Regional Education Board, postsecondary partners, and our national or state organizations like ACTE, ACTEA, and NYSACTE can all be great sources of information that can help you throughout the process. I would also suggest that your fellow BOCES partners should be very helpful to you in the process. The one thing that I have learned over my career is that CTE people are very ready to share their information and to collaborate, and I think it's a wonderful attribute of our professional organizations. So all of the recommendations and input that are discussed and are documented need to be addressed, so that before finalizing the curriculum for the external review team, there is consideration for the inputs. And it will be important to document those inputs and meeting dates and times. In the approval process, SED requires you to submit dates and times of the self-study meetings, who was there, and what recommendations were made. They don't particularly care to see your completed curriculum, which is pretty sad actually, because so much work goes into it. But you will need to be aware that it has to be available to them if they come and audit the program for any reason. So when you start thinking about all of that's involved in a self-study, there are student data that's important. There are people involved from self-study and external review teams. There's a work-based learning component, development of a profile. There are articulations that are critical to the approval process, but it all starts with your curriculum. And if you have a good curriculum, you're going to have very much the heart of all of the rest of the work ready to go as the process goes through. So some resources for you. I did mention that, the CTE Center, the Technical Assistance Center of New York State, is a great source of information. They continue to update their website with great information. This page at the bottom, I'm sure that Gretchen will be forwarding the presentation for your use if you would like it, is a great way to connect. Also, if you just go to the nyctecenter.org site, and certainly can find some great resources there. These are additional resources that I pulled off, and they are all hyperlinked as well. And the guidance from SED is important for you to read and understand, because when folks come through and work with you on your self-study process and external review, they will rely on you as being the experts, because this process is very unique to career and technical education. So recommend that you go through this and understand some of the guidelines and regulations, especially commissioner's regulations related to integrated and specialized credit for academic courses. And certainly when preparing your application, there is a lot of guidance on their site. So with that, I guess at this point, we're getting close to our 30-minute mark. I want to thank you for your time today. And I guess at this time, Gretchen, we'll take any questions.
Great, thanks, Dave. We don't have any questions right now. Let's give the attendees maybe about a minute, and they can type in any if they have them.
Fantastic, thank you.
All right, well, it doesn't look like we have any questions, Dave. So on behalf of the Technical Assistance Center, thank you for your presentation today, and thank you to those who joined us. As a reminder, this presentation was recorded and will be posted on nyctecenter.org/webinars along with the PowerPoint slides.